Hey everybody, I have a video here for you. Now, I had a question recently about the Osireion, and I thought that would be an excellent subject for a video. I have only shown the Osireion, and I have never talked about it, and some sites deserved to be talked about in Egypt, and some sites are clear evidence of a remote antiquity that isn't recognized by Egyptologists or the standard model of history. And here we are flying into the Osireion, which is located behind the temple of Seti I. And here it is. And people have associated the Osireion to the building of the temple of Seti, but that just doesn't seem to fly with me. And I just want to go over to a couple websites and talk about the Osireion, some ancient writings about it coming from Strabo, and excavation work that was done in the early 1900s. I'm just going to go over to a website. Now, this is ancientwisdom.com, and I wanted to share this article because it goes over basically my thoughts on the Osireion pretty well. And this is entitled The Osireion, Strabo's Well in the Fountain of Abydos, and Abydos is one of the most ancient sites in Egypt. It says, the water in the temple is an indication of the level of the Nile approximately 6.5 miles away. It measures approximately 20 by 30 meters and is 50 feet lower and is made of a clearly different construction style to that of the temple of Seti I, and it says 6th dynasty, but if my recollection is correct, I believe he is a pharaoh of the 19th dynasty. It says the water level inside the temple is attached to the water table. And then it refers to some writings from the past on the Osireion, and it shows a picture of it here. And it says, as Seti I began the search for a location for his temple, he was led to a location north of Luxor in the bend of the river Nile. There he began to dig the foundation for his temple. What he discovered was the Osireion, or the ancient temple of Osiris. Whether he actually knew that the Osireion was there, perhaps we will never know. But upon finding this ancient temple, in the path of his new temple, he turned his new temple to the left. It is the only temple in Egypt that makes an L-turn. And I guess that is the big debate. Common sense tells you that these two temples were created at different times. So did Seti I want to build his temple and attach it to the older legacy of the Osireion? Had he already discovered the Osireion, or was Seti I constructing his temple and just happened to come across the Osireion when he was digging his new temple or putting in the foundation for it? That is a question that I guess really cannot be answered, but he seemed to align his temple with the ancient Osireion. So what I am thinking is he discovered this ancient temple and aligned his new temple just to attach his legacy to an older time. And of course, in the temple of Seti I, we have some pretty unique things, and it's possible that he unearthed some ancient information in the Osireion, because in the temple of Seti I, we have an ancient kings list that hints of older times than the first dynasty, and we have some interesting glyphs on the walls in that temple of Seti. But going back to this article here, it has some pictures here. Here you can see the totally bare, perfectly made columns, and then we have this work coming from the temple of Seti above it here. Let me just blow that up a little bit here. But clearly, these two constructions were made at different times. Anybody can see that, and if they use common sense, that is the conclusion that'll be reached. But here is some more, and temples made by dynastic Egyptians had glyphs and artwork all over them, but these walls are totally bare, and there's only one place in Egypt that is reminiscent of this style. I'll talk about that at the end here. But here is a perfect pillar, and here is the water line, and I think further proof that this temple was not built by Seti I is that the water level would have already been at the floor of this temple. Geologists have proved during the time of Seti I, so he would not have built a basement temple in water. That just doesn't make any sense. And another thing is Egyptologists will tell you that this Osirion was built by Seti I as a basement temple, and he built it in this style just to reflect an older time. And he built it in water. That's what Egyptologists will tell you. Here are some more looks at the Osirion, and he even has a arched stone tunnel in it. Here is an artist's rendition of what the Osirion looked like, and when it was first excavated, I guess just part of the ceiling remained. Massive monolithic granite blocks that come from down the Nile in Aswan, same place that construction of the Great Pyramid came from. And this comes from 1914, some writings that were done during the excavations of Abydos, and I'll try to leave a bunch of links below. There is no longer any doubt then that we have discovered what Strabo calls the well or fountain of Abydos. He spoke of it as being near the temple at a great depth and remarkable for some corridors whose ceilings were formed of enormous monolithic blocks. That is exactly what we have found. And it goes on to say these cells were 17 in number, 6 on each side of the long side. There was one in the middle of the wall at the back. In passing through it, we came in the rear to a large hall, which was the tomb of Osiris. A careful study of the sculptures confirmed that the opinion that this was a funeral hall where the remains of the god were expected to be found, but this hall did not form part of the original edifice. It must have been constructed underground when Seti I built the temple of the god. The tomb of Osiris was very near the great reservoir. Nothing revealed its presence. The entrance to it was exactly like that to all other cells, the back of it being walled up after they had dug through it. We have, as yet, no certain indications of the date of the construction, but the style, the size of the materials, the complete absence of all ornamentation, all indicate very great antiquity. Up to the present time, what is called the Temple of the Sphinx at Giza has always been considered one of the most ancient edifices of Egypt. It is contemporaneous with the Pyramid of Chephren, and that is all, up for debate, but he links it to the Temple of the Sphinx at Giza, and really, the construction method of the Osirion, you'd have to go to the Sphinx Temple. And let me show you here. Here is the Sphinx Temple at Giza. Here is the Osirion. And you have the same building materials in both places. No ornamentation in either place. Common sense tells me that these places were built at the same time. And I dated the building of the Sphinx to maybe a time of about 7800 BC, 7600 BC, somewhere around that period, making it over 9,000 years old. And there is nothing to tell me from my research that the Osirion isn't as old as the Temple of the Sphinx here. I think the Osirion is about 9,000 years old also. Dynastic Egyptians put their artwork all over the temple, all over their work. There's nothing here. Nothing here at this temple at the Sphinx, the Valley Temple, and here is, you see, work at the Osirion and at Giza, and you notice these stones, they're, no artwork on them, but they are perfectly slotted together, and I heard John Anthony West say you cannot fit a credit card between these here, but you notice they have these little nodules, protuberances, popping out of them here, and also here. It says, the same maneuvering protuberances were left on the otherwise finished blocks. These are the only two known examples of this technique in early dynastic structures. Geologists have pushed the dating of the Sphinx way back further than the 4th dynasty, and I think the Osirion should be considered in that same breath. Now, just wrapping it up here, I just want to show a couple older pictures of the Osirion here. And here you see it when it was partially buried, and this was totally buried in Antiquity. And it just makes you wonder how many hills and depression of ancient Egypt covered by sand hold treasures like the Osirion that haven't been discovered yet. And Strabo, there are 2 sites in Egypt that have the same construction method, and really only 2, and it is the Osirion and the Valley Temple at the Sphinx. But Strabo hints of another site that might hold a similar construction, and that is the Great Labyrinth. And I made a video about the rediscovery of the Great Labyrinth at Hawara, and Carmen Bolter has been involved with that. I will leave some links for that below. But I don't know if we're going to hear any more about this, because Egyptologists probably don't want you studying that, and they're not going to allow any work to be done, because that will prove a much greater antiquity in ancient Egypt. Just wanted to mention that. But the legends of the Osireion, I just want to read. It says, "It is said that a catfish swallowed the phallus of Osiris when he was cut into pieces by Seth. The Osireion is traditionally known as its final resting place. In reverence of this myth, catfish are left in the water to this day, as the photo on the right demonstrates taken at the Osireion in 2003. And these waters still today hold kind of a mythical reverence in regards to fertility. And I was watching a video with John Anthony West not too long ago, where he said he was at the Osireion with a group and just checking it out, when he noticed a woman and her elderly mother, and they went down to the water, and the younger lady splashed water up her legs. And so this myth of the catfish and the phallus and these waters supposedly offering some sort of fertility powers to women, that myth still lives on. I just thought that was very interesting. But the Osireion is directly connected to Osiris and the tomb of Osiris. Was it an actual tomb? No. I think R.A. Schwaller-de-Lubitz goes over it very well. It's probably a symbolic tomb of Osiris, and I find it very interesting that the ancient Egyptians refer to the Valley Temple as a temple of Isis, and the only temple other than that constructed in the same method. The Osirion is connected to Osiris, so we have Isis and Osiris temples being unique, the only two of this construction method. I don't think that's an accident. The materials used in the Osirion are the same as in the Valley Temple and in the Great Pyramid, and I think we can push the dating of the original construction in the Osirion back maybe about 9,000 years. That is just my opinion. And going back to Google Earth here, I will just back out. That was my thoughts on the Osirion and some ancient work, or some work from past history that was done on the Osirion, what people were writing about it. But that is all up for speculation, just my thoughts. Hope you thought that was interesting, and you all have a nice day.